Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Creighton.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Day 3 of being COVID negative. Yahoo! All right. This is good progress. 3 days in a row now. I'm feeling better and better and better. And we hope you're feeling better too, no matter what it is you're doing or going through or experiencing in your life. Jody Lynn, first of all, I haven't seen those glasses before, have I?
I probably have never worn them on the show.
Okay, that explains it. Yeah. It's quite a look for you. I like it.
Hopefully a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's good. It just takes a little get used to. I mean, I'm like you said, I'm used to not seeing you without glasses, or seeing you without glasses rather. But that's all right. That's good.
Yeah, I was trying to look studious today.
It works. It works for you. It plays. Yeah. I mean, the whole outfit, it works great. I like it.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, it's freaking cold in Canada today.
Well,
so.
Yeah, that is Canada.
This morning,
isn't it?
It was minus 30 degrees Celsius.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, that'll wake you up.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's cold.
Yeah, that's the kind of day where there's no doubt in your mind that it's cold. You just know from the top of your head down to the tip of your toe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's one of those days that you shouldn't have to go outside. And when you do, you just curse.
and you get inside as fast as humanly possible.
That's right. Yep. Hence the scarf and being all bundled up because I'm still cold from going outside earlier.
But at least you do it in style. It's a gorgeous scarf. So, you know, do it in style, right?
Thank you. I try.
Yeah. You do more than try. You do very well. And someone else who does very well is our guest today. Her name is Dannie Novo. And Dannie doesn't mince any words. She's a happiness coach. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Direct.
Easy.
Right to the point. I love that. Especially for your daily dose of happy, right? I mean, if you're going to have a happiness coach on, where else would you want to have him?
That's right.
Right?
You just fit with us, Dannie.
Absolutely.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
So welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Where are you connecting from?
I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay. Yeah. Well, as you heard, Jody Lynn's from Alberta, and I'm in Connecticut, so we're kind of spread out. But that's all right. That's a good.
Okay, so I'm the warmest of the group, I guess.
Right now, you are. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's something else.
These things are relative, you see. So how did you become a happiness coach?
Oh my goodness. It was just something that was sort of thrust upon me. I was living the life that I thought everyone was supposed to live. I was a lawyer and I had a good job. I had the house and the husband and, drove a nice car and was functioning in life. I was doing well at work. I paid the bills. I went to the grocery store. I went to the gym. But I wasn't really living a very fulfilling life. And I had gone through a really bad depression in my teens and into my early 20s that I was treated for and kind of tried to sweep under the rug and pretend like never really occurred. So again, I was functioning, I was existing, but that's about all I was doing. And then one day I had my daughter and she was about a year old. And one night I'm making dinner. And I'm stirring a pot on the stove sort of mindlessly. And she's on the floor and she's got her little play bowls and spoons that she's tapping away at. And she kind of stops for a second and she looks up at me with her big brown eyes and kind of try to get my attention as if, to say, look at this. And she started mimicking me. She started deliberately stirring the way that I was stirring on the stove. And she was my only child. So it was the first time I'd seen anything like that. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I bent over and I'm like, yeah, just like mommy. And then I just had this crushing wave of nausea hit me and I almost fainted on top of my baby because it was at that moment I realized she was copying my every move. And I was teaching her how to live this very depressed, lonely, and unfulfilled life. So I sat down on the floor next to her and I promised her right then and there I was going to learn everything there was to know about happiness. Now, I didn't think I could be happy. I didn't think I was wired for it. But I promised to learn it so I could teach it to her so she never had to go through the same things in life that I went through. And of course, when I started really studying it and implementing it and talking to people about it, my life very quickly started to change. And at first everybody kind of thought I was nuts because I went from this very serious lawyer to, talking about happiness all the time. And it became a very isolating journey, quite honestly. But then one day my little brother came to me And he said, what are you doing? You're talking about this stuff, but I don't really get it. Can you explain? And I said, well, a little of this and some of this, why are you asking? And he said, because you seem really happy and I have never seen you like that before. And then he added on, if it's working for you, do you think it would work for me too? And I said, yeah, it's worth a shot. Let's try it. And so his life started to change. And I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe there's something to this. Maybe I can make a system, a method where you can kind of recreate this for other people. So again, they don't have to suffer the way that I did. And that's just kind of how the happiness coach thing came to be.
All right. How cool too that you drew your inspiration from your daughter mimicking you.
Yeah, I mean, I still have the picture of her on the floor that day. I wanted to memorialize that moment because I knew it was going to be life-changing in some way, shape, or form, just not to this extent. But she woke me up, and thank goodness she came along because I really don't know how long I would have made it without her.
Well, you got to give yourself some credit too, because that takes a certain degree of self-awareness to see your daughter just doing a little mimic thing there and then make the connection that she's picking up on everything, including when you weren't feeling good. That's a big leap right there.
Yeah, I was lucky I was paying attention, right? Because how often do you just allow things to occur in life and don't see them as the signs they're truly meant to be, right?
But you did it.
Thank goodness.
That's really great. Yeah.
I have no idea how bad it was.
That's excellent. So what happened to the career? I guess the career changed at that point.
The career changed. I'm still a lawyer. I still do some legal things, but I do it very differently than I did in the past. And and it shifted, and I became more of a speaker and author kind of person, which was, different for me. That took a huge shift because I never saw myself as that kind of person. I had really allowed myself to be broken down. I tell people that I was so lacking in self-worth that I could not make eye contact with myself in my own bathroom mirror when I was alone. I just didn't see myself as worthy enough to even recognize myself. So it took a lot to really, change that way of thinking and change those beliefs about myself. But I knew I had to do them because, again, I knew who was watching. And for whatever reason, I just had this knowledge that came to me. It didn't matter what I said. It didn't matter what I pretended to be. It really mattered what I was. And so I needed to change for her because my why became, her living the life of her dreams, but she allowed me to do the same thing in return.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It also, the line where you said that you couldn't look yourself in the mirror, boy, I could really identify with that. Because I've told the story many times here on the show about my first time doing mirror work, and it was not pretty.
Yeah,
it was like, I love you. Oh God, I can't do this. It was one of those kinds of things, but I can appreciate what it feels like. Because when you don't feel good about yourself, you're right. You can't look yourself in the eye. It's like, maybe you might, be able to look out of the corner of your eye. That might be about all you can really allow.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. It was almost too painful for me to acknowledge the fact that I was living the way that I was, right? It was just, I kind of wanted just to ignore it so that I could keep going. And, I would go from task to task throughout my day instead of living moment to moment. And in order to keep doing that, I really had to put blinders on and sort of shut myself down to a lot of things outside of me, and the joy that I was missing out on, and just, really getting to know myself as well. And I started to believe some things that were really not true. And of course, really stopped loving myself in the process as well.
Interesting phrase, stopped loving yourself in the process. That implies that you were loving yourself before.
I think, I think as children, we love ourselves. And then, these stories get built up in our minds about who we believe ourselves to be. My daughter right now, is into superheroes, right? She loves the Avengers and all of those people. And she believes that she is a superhero underneath it all, right? She's 7 years old. And I see that in her, and I see when she looks at herself in the mirror and she has her superhero outfit on and her cape, right? Just the light that comes into her eyes, the joy and just the fun of it all, because somewhere in there, she believes she's capable of something really amazing. Right. And then life happens to us. You know what I just saw? I just saw a video on TikTok. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Uncle Buck, but it was a movie in the 80s with Macaulay Culkin and John Candy. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene where he goes into the principal's office of his niece, and she starts saying about how his 6-year-old niece is, you know, a silly heart and a daydreamer and doesn't take anything seriously. And he just kind of goes off on her. And I was just thinking, you know, that's what we do to our kids, to our youth. They're just out there dreaming and thinking of all the things that could be possible. And society comes in and says, no, you can't do it that way. It can't be like that. You've got to fit in this box. You've got to do it this way. And then, you know, God forbid, you know, you try something and it doesn't work out and everyone says, oh, see, I told you. And these stories start to form in our minds, and it's like, oh, it's not that easy. It's not going to happen for me. It isn't this. It isn't that. And we internalize that as, well, then it must be a problem with me. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's when we start, you know, sort of pulling back the reins on, well, you know, maybe I'm not as great as I think I am. And, you know, maybe I'm not this, and, you know, maybe this isn't for me. And slowly but surely we start to believe less and less of ourselves and hold ourselves accountable for less and less, unfortunately. And, you know, that self-confidence starts to wither away.
Mm-hmm.
We talk ourselves out of a lot, don't we?
We do. We do, especially our happiness. I was really good at doing that.
It's nice to have a skill, but maybe not that one.
Yeah. That's very persuasive. I mean, and unfortunately that energy carries over to other people too. So I was very persuasive of letting other people know that, you know, I didn't believe in the whole happiness fairy tale kind of a thing. And not that I didn't think it didn't exist, but I just didn't think that it existed for me. And I didn't think it existed for many, not on a truthful level. When I really started doing the work into it, though, I realized how little I really needed to be happy, and but also how hard I had to work for it too, and continue to work for it. Right. Like, you know, I want muscles. I go to the gym and I've got to go every day, and I've got to lift heavy sometimes. And then I have to maintain that. Right. It's just not something I do and then get there. And then I have muscles for the rest of my life. It's constant maintenance. And so that's how I look at my happiness now. It's the first thing I take care of every single day. It's non-negotiable. And if I do nothing else but that, then it's still considered a good day. So yeah, I mean, I need very little, but I have to be consistent at it.
That's a really interesting observation. You need very little.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
Because happiness is internal. You know, anytime that you're looking for anything external from you to complement your happiness or support your happiness or measure your happiness, then it immediately, you know, that power to be happy is stripped from you. Right. So I don't need money. I don't need a fancy car. I don't need, you know, to look important in front of certain people. I've gotten to the point where I know, I mean, I love it. I love my relationship with my daughter and other people, but I even know that I don't need love from another human being, that the love that I have for myself has to be enough. I have to be self-sustaining in my happiness. Otherwise, you know, it's like a house of cards. It just all falls apart.
Yeah. Wow. I want to come back to something you said at the beginning, because I think it's really important. And I think that a lot of people struggle with that. At the very beginning, you said it was an isolating journey. And I want to acknowledge your courage for going on that journey, because, you know, I've never been a lawyer or anything, but I have a financial brokerage. So kind of like similar, what I would assume are similar environments, you know, male dominated cultures. It's all about the money, the things. And when I started to go on a different path and follow my happiness and really get in touch with what made me happy, me, not everybody else, but me, there was a lot of backlash from that world, those people.
Yeah.
And I imagine you had the same or a similar experience with that. And I'd love for you to touch more on that and what helped you move through that and keep going outside of what you've already said.
Yeah, it wasn't well received in that community. Unfortunately, misery loves company. And so, the legal profession is not exactly known as a happy profession. Unfortunately, it's typically number one or number two for the rate of suicide and depression. It's always number one for alcohol abuse and one or two for the rate of divorce, right? It's just, it's not,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is not a happy place to be, and very demanding, obviously, very type A personalities, putting a lot of pressure on themselves. And again, a lot of money, a lot of competition, and, just this, sort of, elitist belief, right? When we're the attorneys and we hang out with other attorneys and we do attorney stuff, and then there's the hierarchy amongst the attorneys, right?
Right.
And
yeah. The big fish.
A lot of posturing, and it's a lot like, high school all over again.
Yeah.
Interesting description. It's like high school all over.
Yeah, it really is. It is. Who's the popular one? Who do you want to be seen with? What kind of clothes are you wearing? What are you pulling into the courthouse parking lot in? All of that.
What's your house look like?
Yeah, it all means a lot. And I was very much caught up in that to some degree, probably not to the extent that other people were, but you feel that momentum behind you, sort of pushing you, driving you, right? And so when I started, at first everyone's like, oh yeah, you should really find that happiness, because we didn't want to see our colleagues struggling, the ones who were struggling with addiction or going through really bad divorces, things like that. Nobody really wanted to see anyone go through that. We just kind of accepted it as part of the profession. It's just stuff that happened. So, people would say, yeah, you need to go out and find your happiness because we don't want you to be like so-and-so or whatever. But when you really start to dig into it and kind of even start to find it, it wasn't, supported. It wasn't like, oh, good for you, you're finding it. It was, first it was like, who do you think you are? You're not leaving this, right? You're not allowed to be happy and do this at the same time. You're not allowed to walk around with a smile on your face when everyone else is stressed out and angry. And, I had partners in the firm I used to work with who would come into my office and just throw, trial binder books at my head because they were just so stressed out and angry all the time. And, you can't, it's impossible to function in an environment like that. And so it wasn't even my friends, the people I thought I was friends with, really did not accept it. And so, I became very distant from most of the profession. I spoke with maybe one or two people that I had been close with who were just sort of built a little bit differently than the rest of them. But I really took a step back and designed my practice so that I had sort of minimal contact with a lot of other attorneys, and worked more directly with businesses, and formed a business where I could work from home even before COVID, and just change the way it looked. But that was a very hard thing to do too, because no one that I knew was doing it that way. And that wasn't accepted either. I wasn't a real lawyer anymore. I was doing all this other crazy stuff. So, I'll run into people from time to time, and, they'll all say the same things. You look great. You look fantastic, because they all look, I'm sorry. They look like they go through it every single day of their lives and they don't take care of themselves. You look great, and I watch your stuff online and it looks like so much fun, and it's so great. But there's always like this, hint of jealousy behind things. And I know people are kind of talking behind my back and not saying the most positive of things. And I really just have to kind of put that off to the side and not let it affect me. Initially it hurt, people really did exit stage left, not just from the career aspects of my life, but a lot of my personal life. I'm divorced now. And, but again, that why was so important to me. It became it became my obsession in life because I was either going to figure out how to be happy or I was going to die trying. I had given up too much at that point, and there was too much on the line to not succeed at it. And so that's what took me through a lot of the painful stuff.
Wow.
This is very interesting because as you're telling us your story, I'm flashing back to my college years because I had intended to become a lawyer. That
Okay.
was my original plan. And then
Yeah,
I went, and then I went to school and I took some pre-law courses and I said, no, absolutely not. This is not happening. But as I think about it, when I think to what was the basis for my decision, no, I didn't want to pursue law. Usually the way I think about it and the way I usually express it is, well, I thought the law was going to be rational and logical, and it turned out that it was nothing of the kind. And so that's why I didn't want to get involved in it. I think on a certain level, I was detecting what you were talking about because I never thought about that. I never thought about stressed out lawyers and type A personalities and, people just living for the things and the status and all that kind of thing. I knew that existed, but I don't think I ever really equated consciously in my mind that when you pursue a legal career under the current system, that's where you're aiming at. That was like part of the goal, really.
Yeah, it's a lot to take on. I had just come out of that horrible depression and suffered greatly through, most of my college years and before that. So now all of a sudden here I am, first year law student, and I had imagined this place of, there being some camaraderie, right? This is really hard. We're kind of all in this together. Let's, kind of like, not that it wouldn't be competitive, but there would still be this sort of, feeling of, okay, we're here, we made it another day. Like, let's hit the books. Let's do what we got to do. And it was nothing like that at all. And I was really down on it one day. And I remember sitting in my one professor's office, and he had an office way up on the top floor, and he was
True Ivory Tower. Okay.
He did. And he smoked. So he just chain smoked. He was the only one in the building he was allowed to smoke because he had been there so long, and people were buried, right? So he could do whatever he wanted. He didn't care. So he had this little balcony. He would open the door and he would just sit there and chain smoke and just spout his wisdom, right? And so I was asking him a question about contracts, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, the tone in my voice must have shifted or something. And he says, "There's something else you want to ask me?" And I said, "Yeah." I was like, "What is it with this place?" He said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Yeah, I kind of thought that, people would be, a little bit more supportive of each other, kind of going through this really hard time together." And he was like, "Let me tell you something about the law." He's like, "It attracts a lot of a-holes. You better get used to it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And that was, the first time that I realized maybe I should take a look around at some of these people and, really see what I'm getting into. And he wasn't kidding, right?
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah. He could kind of take it in stride. I mean, he had definitely paid his dues, but, that was, the first time I was kind of like, oh yeah, this is not going to be, I'm going to have to be really careful what I say to people who I make friends with, and be a little bit, guarded, which definitely doesn't help the whole, I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling, disconnected from the world, right? It very much makes that feel overwhelming at times.
Mm-hmm. And it almost sets you up like that kind of a system, if you will, or like it's more than just a place of work, but that kind of structure also sets you up for always looking outside of yourself to fulfill that happiness. That's, what I was chasing in that brokerage business is, I got to make more money and more money and more money because, 100K isn't enough and 500K is enough. Like you get to this marker, but once you got there, it was like, so what? On to the next one because it's not good enough.
Right.
And you didn't get what you thought you would get once you got there. Like there was no feeling of like, wow, this is amazing. It feels good. It was like back to the grindstone. I got to do more because once I do more and I have more, then I will be happy.
Right.
And for me, that was huge, seeing that part of the place where I was working, that system, and how it didn't matter what the thing was, it was never going to make me happy.
No.
The only one that could is me.
Because enough was never enough. I mean, people don't
Exactly.
realize they're chasing the dopamine hit more than they're chasing anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
I had one day, and I'll never forget it. And never forget it, because it was a definitive moment of what am I doing with my life, kind of a thing. I live on the western side of Pennsylvania. I had a hearing on the eastern side of Pennsylvania at, 10 o'clock in the morning. So I had to get up at some ridiculous hour because it's a 6-hour drive there, right? I had to get there in time, made it just in time for the hearing. I get there, the other side doesn't even show up. So it's judgment in my favor. 5 minutes later, I'm back on the road, back home. Okay. So now I'm back. It's another 6 hours. I'm exhausted just from billing the amount of hours that I bill anyway. So I'm literally smacking myself in the face, trying to stay awake because I know I have to get back for another client meeting, which I get to. I go to the meeting. Then I have to go to an event for the firm that evening, which I attend. And then the next morning, I've got to be in another state for a deposition. So I get back in my car and I drive another 6 hours and fell asleep while I was behind the wheel, and luckily woke up fast enough to sort of, not really have anything happen. And there was no other traffic on the road. But I was the whole time after that, I was just like, oh my goodness. And I remember going to talk to my partner a few days later and just saying, this schedule that I'm on, like, I can't sustain it. Like, physically, I'm falling asleep behind the wheel. And his response was, I don't care what you have to do, just do it. Right. Wow. I don't want to hear about the labor pains. Show me the baby. I don't want to hear any of it. And you realize, that it's like, what are we chasing by doing this? Right. Like, a position that's going to yield, a couple of $1,000s for our client, right, at the expense of something else. And, it just never made sense to me, but it made sense to everybody else because it wasn't even the money that they were chasing. It was, at that point, the money was kind of immaterial. It was just this, I have to beat the next person. I've got to do the next thing, because once you slow down, once you stop that momentum, you come to a screeching halt, and having to sit there again and look at yourself in the mirror, right? Most people can't do. And so it's like, I have to keep going. I've got to keep doing this. Number one, I need that dopamine to keep me, elevated enough to not start feeling the depression and everything else going on in my life. But number two, when I slow down, I've got to look at things that I don't want to look at. So I'm going to put my focus back here and do more and be more and look more important and hope that that's enough at the end of the day, which it never is.
No.
How interesting what you're describing. I love it. But how interesting that you're describing the main motivation of someone who's in the midst of that kind of career in the typical way that it's done is to basically make sure that they're never having to confront themselves.
Right.
That's really interesting. So that it isn't the money, it isn't the accolades, it isn't the winning the game. It's not having to face yourself.
It's not those things, because they love the accolades and they love the hip hip hooray and they love when that big check comes in, but it hits and it's like, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Going to the next thing.
What else you got? What's tomorrow? Right? Like, I'm going to go to bed tonight. And then when I wake up tomorrow, like, whatever happened last night isn't going to carry me through the rest of the day. I've got to place this, because again, it's happiness is placed outside of them, but so is their self-validation. It's all outside of them. So if that goes away, then I don't even have an identity anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I got to thank you. You just gave me a perspective that I never had that made it possible for me to feel sorry for lawyers.
You should. They need you.
I mean, seriously.
They really...
It's never been high on my list of priorities, but now I have a way to do it. Like, okay, yeah, I get it.
The sad part is there's some really great people that are trapped in that cycle too, right? Mm-hmm. Some really good human beings who just can't put it down either. And then there's some people that are not so good. I mean, again, that profession attracts a lot of a-holes. And then they're never going to change because they don't want to, but there are good people that are trapped in it. And I mean, I don't think, it's just the legal profession where that occurs too. I mean, you see, surgeons go through the same kind of thing, obviously finance and, Hollywood industry. I mean, anything that's, really driven and competitive, you kind of see this thing go on. So.
Yeah. Something that I've always wondered. So something I realized going through that process was that I had a false sense of happy for most of my career, my time working, well, most of my life really, chasing all of these things. Like I thought I was happy, but the question that I've had ever since I feel I've found true happiness and like went within to give it to myself and have that validation from myself rather than outside is, do they even have a conscious awareness that that's not happiness?
No.
And I've never been able to answer that and just thought, maybe I'm just weird and I could see it and maybe they are happy. I don't know. But everything that you're saying validates exactly the response that you gave. No.
Yeah, no, because they're not going to slow down long enough to even ask that question and give themselves an honest answer.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I can't, like me trying to look at myself in the mirror. It's like, I can't even go there because everything is going to self-destruct.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people are just going to say, I don't even have the time to do that. I have bills to pay.
Yeah.
I have children to take care of. I have this, I have that. I can't slow down and self-destruct and worry about this part of me. Right. But the thing is, it catches up with you sooner or later. You're going to have to look at it, right? Whether it's an illness or something's going to come up in your life where it's going to force you to take a look at it. And then it's like, okay, well, you thought it was inconvenient before. Well, we're going to make it really inconvenient for you now.
Yeah.
How interesting though, because what you're describing is a person who actually is in touch with what would happen. I mean, what would happen is a doomsday scenario, but nevertheless, they have awareness of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think we are, our hearts are always talking to us. I believe that, right? Our hearts have the answers. They know everything that you need to know about your own happiness. They know everything that they need, to tell you about yourself. And that voice comes through. But we're very good at dulling it down and allowing the chatter of all the other voices in the world to mask it and to drown it out. Right. So, we become very good at just pretending like we didn't hear it, or we hear it for a second and then we're just like, no, that can't possibly be right. Or, I'm daydreaming. It couldn't be like that ever. Right. But that voice comes up. And I think, at times when you're having a bad day, maybe when you're not feeling well or something happens in life, or, that divorce seems like it's going to be imminent, or, you see your children struggle with something, right? Those moments where where everything gets very still for you, that voice pops up and it's like, yeah, I really want that for myself. But, right, then all these voices come in and say, yeah, but you forgot, right? Your car payment's due in 2 days and you booked that vacation for your family. You can't let them down. And, you're going to want that bonus check in 2 months, and, all those things that start to filter in again. And it just keeps you trapped. That's what it's designed to do. So
Interesting. That has a design to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just thinking about a conversation I had with somebody, and unfortunately I don't have permission to give you any of the context. So you'll have to just assume it was a conversation that was relevant to what we're talking about.
Okay.
But, I was helping this person to understand, or trying to help him understand, how he had created a situation for himself.
Okay.
And I was basically encouraging him to, sit down and have a little conversation with himself, a little self-honesty, and, address all the different aspects of the situation and all that kind of thing. And he did what I think everybody does to one extent or another when confronted with that possibility. And that is, he defended himself on every level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as he was doing it, it was really interesting because he would alternate between trying to convince himself of it and trying to convince me of it.
Yeah.
It would vary from second to second which way he was going with it. If he saw that I was, not buying into it, then he'd turn around the other way, and then he couldn't really go that way. So he'd come back to me. It was like being in his own ping pong match, so to speak, where he's playing both sides of the table.
Right. It's really painful to watch someone go through that. I mean, that was definitely part of my problem for the longest time. Number one, I was really good at throwing myself a pity party every day and saying, woe is me. And, even though I considered myself a strong human being, I still had that underlying, this isn't your fault. And then one day I'm like, you know what? I'm the common denominator here. Maybe it's my fault. Right?
That was the phrase I kept using.
Yeah,
You're
right?
the common denominator of your own life.
Me.
As annoying as that is,
Mhm.
Which is, a really fun realization because, number one, it makes everything really easy all of a sudden because you realize the only thing you have to worry about is yourself. And then when you start to do the work, you're like, oh crap, I've got to worry about myself. And there's a lot going on in here. Lawyers we like to be smart people. We like to be perceived as smart, right? And so anytime anybody would say anything that made me feel like they didn't think I was smart, I took immediate offense to. And then one day I was finally like, you know what? Maybe you're really just not that smart because you can read a book and you can figure out this lawyer stuff, but your life is kind of a mess. Like maybe you're really not as smart as you think you are. And it kind of became a joke with me and the universe, so to speak, right? Like maybe you're just not as smart as you think you are. I mean, human beings really aren't that smart when you come down to it, right? Because of what we do to ourselves every single day and what we do to our planet and to each other. So when I kind of adopted that mindset, it became a lot easier. It was like, you know what? I'm not. But I can educate myself. I can learn how to be different. And I know with anything like law school or anything else I wanted to learn, it takes time. And of course it takes making mistakes on top of it. And I think that's where the self-love kind of started to come back because I knew I was going to be making a lot of mistakes, but if I wanted to get better, I had to keep going. And so I was going to have to forgive those mistakes and allow for them and keep going despite those mistakes. And that's really, forgiveness right there. And when you forgive, you can abandon a lot of the shame, which keeps us on that wheel of defending ourselves all the time.
Yeah. I have a cat that's scratching at the door and I gotta go let him in. So, Jody, I'm going to turn it over to you. We've talked a lot about my interview style, so I'm going to give you a chance to see if you can apply. Ooh, the
like
test. Here we go.
Hey, I'm going to take a note from Danny's book. I'm going to try. I might not be that smart. I'm definitely going to make mistakes.
That's a good start. I like that.
Yeah. Danny, I love that, the way that you approached responsibility. Because what I teach in my coaching practice with abundance is the phases that we go through with responsibility. And I noticed this with myself is that when I first started learning about responsibility, I used it as like a whacking stick. Like you're a bad person. You did something bad. You're never going to be good enough. I went down that track and it was learning to shift and allow those mistakes and forgive myself and give myself some grace to learn as I moved through it that made the biggest difference. I can take responsibility, but responsibility does not have to be a beating stick. It's an opportunity to learn, okay, I want more of that or I don't want more of that. And what can I do to move forward in the direction that I really want to go? So I love that you made that distinction here.
Right. I mean, it's, anytime things are not going the way that I want them to go, right, I still have the immediate response is, it couldn't possibly be me. But then I'm just like, okay, we know too much at this point to know that it probably is you, or you have, some part that you're playing in all of this. And just going back to it and just saying to yourself, okay, what can I learn here? Because I believe life is that mirror for us, right? It is always showing us something about ourselves or something that we need to learn or something that we're supposed to get out of this whole journey that we're on. If it's presented in front of us, then there's a reason to be looking at it. And I always say, okay, what's the lesson? And maybe I don't get that answer today. Maybe it's one of those things I got to carry around in my pocket for a little while, but I know eventually something will come of it. Right. And so, also just having that patience with yourself that, you might start the lesson today, but you might not really get it for 5 or 10 years down the road. And that's okay. Yeah.
It can take time.
Yeah.
And actually, I think part of it is recognizing that you are getting smart. I mean, you talked earlier about, well, maybe I'm not so smart, but on the other hand, being willing to do things like admit, oh yeah, I am the common denominator in all the things that happen in my life. Oh yeah, I actually did play a role in all this stuff. Oh yeah, I really am the one who's looking outside of myself. Oh, when you can start doing that, that's actually developing smarts.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you mentioned the word, self-awareness before. I mean, just being more aware of the fact that you're doing something a certain way that you're not, you don't necessarily want to do, or you're not necessarily proud of. It's not a behavior you can stop right at this moment, but just being aware of the fact that you're doing it, and then sort of look at it and say, okay, well, why am I doing this? Like, what am I getting from it? What does this mean? What am I not admitting to myself about it?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, you stop doing it. Right? Or you completely change who you are overnight. That reprogramming takes a lot of time sometimes. I mean, and you
especially if it's deeply seated.
Yeah. Or you don't even realize what triggers it at points. It might be sort of a delayed trigger in your life. And so, it's not like it's something happens and immediately you react. It's something happened a few days ago, and then all of a sudden this behavior is coming back into your life that you thought you kind of got rid of, but now it's here again. It's like, oh, well, maybe I need to, journal a little bit or retrace my steps and see, why all of a sudden is this coming back in? And I think it's just a matter of being curious about yourself. I mean, you're fascinating. So why not take the time to learn more about yourself? It's kind of a cool thing to do with your time.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a good word. You're fascinating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Dannie, is there any like practices or exercises, if you will, that were like your, I guess, big moment where you had like a turning point where like, oh, I get it. This is leading me to my happiness, or like just opened your eyes to what happiness really is, that you would recommend for people listening?
Well, so I'll back up a little bit. When I went through my depression, it started probably around the age of 13 and it progressed from there. So, I initially thought I was sick because I wasn't interested in doing the things that I had typically been interested in doing. And I felt tired all the time and just not like myself. So I went to my parents and I begged them, take me to the doctor, please. I'm sick. There's something wrong. And at first they said, oh, no, you're just a teenager and you're going through your hormonal changes, and that's just kind of part of life. It'll get better. And it didn't. It got worse. So finally they took me to the doctor, and of course they start running all these tests and they can't find anything wrong with me. And in this one specialist office one day, and he said, hey, I would really like for you to sit down with this one woman who comes into my office once a week. And it turned out she was a therapist. And I said, I'll do whatever I have to do because I just want to get better. So at 16, I'm sitting down across the desk from this woman and telling her what's going on. And I'm not really expecting her to have any answers to anything, but she just kind of listens to me. And then she sits back and she says, honey, you're depressed. And I said, I don't even know what that means, but I don't think I am. And let me tell you why. I have a really good life. I live in a nice house. I mean, I've never seen poverty. Like, we weren't rich, but I wasn't like, I never had things to wear or eat. And I grew up with a horse. Like, I rode horses. I said, I don't think you understand. Like, I know there are people in life who are suffering, and I don't have any of those things to worry about. And she said, honey, I think you're depressed.
Persistent anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're the expert. What do I know? I'm 16. So what do we do about it? And she said, well, she went over and she picked up the phone and she called the MD, and next thing I know, I'm on medication. And this is going to fix all my problems, right? I just take these pills every day and this is going to go away. But it didn't. It got worse, to the point of I became suicidal. Wow. And, at 19, I dropped out of school and I checked myself into a psych ward, because I knew that I was going to hurt myself if I didn't do something.
Wow.
I was there for 2 weeks, and they just gave me more medication. And it was like, okay, well, if this one doesn't work, we'll add this one, and then we're going to up the dosage on this one, and then you're going to go home and you're going to be great. And I went home and I was, beside myself. And I held it together through the holidays for the sake of my family. And then I went back in and I said, look, if I leave here, this is going to be it for me. So I need another option. And they said, we've given you everything we can. We don't have any more options. I said, there's got to be something else, because I'm telling you, like, I'm going to succeed in not returning, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
And they said, the only thing we have left for you is electroshock therapy. And I
Wow.
said, okay,
Really?
what do I do? And they said, sign here. And I said, okay. So I have no one advocating for me. I'm completely numbed out on this medication, right? I have no life experience. I have no idea what's going on. A full lockdown unit, and going into therapy with women who had lost children and who had, been through abusive relationships. And I'm 19 years old. I've not even lived any of my life yet. And I haven't experienced these horrific things. And now I'm feeling guilty for being depressed because I don't feel like I don't have a reason for it. But nevertheless, they came and they got me the next morning, and they took me down into the secret part of the hospital, and through these big double doors that looked like Frankenstein's laboratory. And I remember I was shaking and I was crying, and I said, I changed my mind. But, the anesthesia hit me. And when I woke up, I felt like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. And I went through those treatments every other day for a period of weeks. Until one day I realized that my childhood memories were completely gone. I couldn't recall anything from a certain point in my life back. And that scared me enough for me to go in and say, okay, it works. Okay. Because I was so physically depleted and so scared at that point that I was like, yeah, I'm not depressed anymore. Whatever you did worked. I'm good. We can stop this. And they said, okay, prove it to us. And so I had to do things like get a job, and then I had to re-enroll in school, and I had to show them I was making progress on all of these things, which I did, all of those things, and even weaned myself off of all of my medication. But I never addressed any of the reasons why I was depressed. I just pretended like I wasn't. And faked my way through it, to the point of faking my way, graduating, summa cum laude from college, going to law school, passing the bar exam, right? Like, just faking my way through all of it. And then, luckily my daughter came along, because I know eventually I would have crashed again. You just can't sustain that over so long.
Yeah.
But, I think faking it is what really sort of opened my eyes to this kind of whole thing the day that I fell asleep behind the wheel. Like, what am I doing with my life? This can't be what we're here for. Pretending that all of this is fun, that this is happy, that I have a good life, when I can't look at myself in the mirror. Right. And I just remember being so bewildered and being, looking at the people in my life, even who were close to me, and saying, how can this be real? How can you think this is okay? I mean, you're not happy. My parents weren't happy. Obviously my brother was struggling. That's why he came to me. And just how much energy it takes to pretend every single day, and what that does to your heart over time. And I had witnessed it, because my father had a heart attack at a very young age and passed away. And I believe it was honestly because he didn't take care of his heart. I mean, and not necessarily in a physical way, right? He just never opened himself up to, there was so much more to life. And then realizing this idea of so much more to life is really not very much at all, but it's just a completely different way of looking at it. But we don't allow ourselves to go there for so many reasons, and we're so scared of it. I think I had gotten to the point where I had been through so much that the fear didn't even penetrate me anymore. I had so much shame that I carried with me over what I had gone through, these gaps in my resume that I couldn't explain to people. And, I knew people thought I was nuts because I was in a psych ward and I'd gone through this stuff. I was just afraid to tell anybody about what I had been through. So when I finally got to the point of, the point of no return, right? Where it was do this or bust, because my baby is looking at me for answers here. I think that was just enough to say, okay, everything that I have done hasn't worked. So let's just stop and let's start from ground zero, and let's figure out what does. And that's when I wrote my first book, because it was literally the journey of, okay, we'll try this. Doesn't work. All right. Scratch that off the list. Try this. And I mean, I made it an exercise in being ridiculous. I just did the craziest stuff that I could find, because I was like, again, I'm not that smart. What do I even know? So let's just try everything we can possibly think of and anything that comes into our field of vision and see if it works. And if it doesn't, no big deal. And if it does, okay, we'll keep it on the list until it doesn't work anymore. But we don't even give ourselves the freedom to explore, right? Life is supposed to be this constant experiment, and we shut down that experiment at, age 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to go.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, she keeps repeating how, well, she's not that smart. My God, you're brilliant.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Walt. Like, just the capacity you had at such a young age to, like, say, okay, I don't want to do this, but I know I have to do, like, go this route and pretend and whatever. Like, there was no one advocating for you, and there was no one on your side. And you, like, to have the capacity of the wherewithal to realize this is not working. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to pretend to get myself out of here and move on. And the strength that it would have taken to get out of there and pull yourself together enough to go summa cum laude and, like, go to law school. Like, oh, wow. Dannie, you are incredible.
I don't know how much brilliance it was. I think it was a lot of luck and probably some stubbornness too.
Well, the brilliance, I think, is in the fact that despite all of what you've been taught, all that you had been trained to be as a human being, you still found a way to manage to look at something that you were never supposed to look at. You found a way to do it anyway. That, to me, is brilliance.
Yeah.
Because that's basically not fighting. It's, well, in a sense, it's fighting. It's going a path that you're not supposed to go on and doing it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
that takes brilliance to do that. That takes a willingness to say, you know what? I can't explain it. I can't prove it. I can't in any way justify it, but I know that's where I have to go.
Yeah.
That's brilliance.
Yeah. I think it's divine brilliance. Yeah, sure. I mean, cause it took that to save me, right? People like me don't make it. I mean, they don't. The things that I had gone through, a lot of them end up as lifelong addicts, and they usually don't live very long, regardless. I know I made it for a reason. Yeah. And I'm lucky enough to be able to share it now, because everyone sits around and says, oh yeah, you're happy and good for you. And it's easy to be happy when you're Dannie Novo. And it's like, well, yeah, but I really, I had to walk the walk in order to get here. And that's why I understand what you're going through now. So you see this on this side, and hopefully that's enough of some inspiration for you to want to try it. But, it is work. It is looking at things that you don't want to look at, admitting things about yourself that you don't want to admit, and going against the opinions of others, and being isolated and sometimes very, very alone. But again, it's that why, right? How important is your happiness to you? For me, it was everything. I had nothing else to give. The universe had bottomed me out. And maybe I wouldn't have followed that path if that hadn't happened.
I think that we have this preconception that hitting bottom, crash and burn, has to look dramatic. It has to have, there has to be a trauma associated with it. Very often there is. I'm not saying that there isn't. Very often there is. But I think the truth of it is that a crash and burn is really nothing more than a kind of negative way of saying, I'm going to look at myself. I'm going to come face to face with all those things that I have not wanted to come face to face with before. And when you express it that way, it almost doesn't even matter what the nature of the crash and burn was. Right.
It doesn't, because it's catastrophic enough inside of you to bring the house down. Right. So you could just be living a seemingly boring life and not really anything going on. And then that moment of realization hits, and it's like, wow, because literally everything you believed is now being challenged. Yeah. And you start to realize you created the reality that you were living in, but but you could create a different reality. And then it's like, holy crap, well, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot to contend with on a Monday morning.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, you took it to the next level. You created, I love this, Jody Lynn. She created a happiness cookbook.
I know.
How
That's
about
cool.
that, right? Yeah.
I want to see this happiness. I want to buy the happiness cookbook, Danny. Because, you know, sometimes we segregate our life into, you know, my work brings me joy or brings me happiness. Again, like looking to outer things to do that. And I'm not saying that the cookbook is the outer thing, but now going within and like what makes you happy, it's the question of like what food makes you happy and like the presentation of the food and like how does it actually feel when you look at it and you eat it, and that's a whole other level. The
smell triggers things, and the nostalgia of it triggers things, right? You eat 3 times a day or however many times you eat, right? But it's something that you do every single day and it's fueling your system. So pay attention to it because it matters a lot.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Give us a glimpse into this cookbook. This is a great idea.
Yeah. So this honestly was one of the hardest projects I've ever done. There's over 75 recipes and I photographed all of them.
Wow.
So it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. And I broke it down into different sections of happiness. So one section is foods that are scientifically proven to support your happiness. So things that actually help you release those neurotransmitters that keep your dopamine and serotonin levels even throughout the day and help you level out hormonal imbalances, that even help, you know, bring your blood pressure down so you don't feel like your heart's racing all day long and you feel overwhelmed because of that. So there's a whole section on that. And then I did some other things that were fun too. I did a section that was nostalgic for me, but because of, you know, those times in your life when you maybe cooked with a grandparent or a parent or someone who, you know, had some influence over your life in a positive way. Talking about, you know, the holidays and those times when life was magical, when you did believe you were a superhero and, really cool things were happening all over the world and you just saw it as a magical place. And then just sort of like this hearty comfort side of things too. Those foods that just make us feel, you know, like we're taken care of, right? Like the talking about abundance, like the world is really abundant, supplying these wonderful foods for us to eat and we get to share them with family and friends. So I touched on a lot of different areas of happiness with it, but it became a lot of fun to work with, and hopefully there's some good stuff for you in there. I started making some of the recipes with my daughter, and so, you know, I remember making them with my grandmother, and now she asked me this year, are we going to be making this during the holidays? I remember it from last year. So it's becoming a little bit of a legacy piece too, which is kind of fun, but you can create that in your own family or with your own friends or whoever you want to invite into your life, and help them create a little happiness too.
How do they find a copy of that cookbook?
You can find all of my books on my website, which is DannieDeNovo.com. But the book is called It's All Gravy, and it's also on Amazon. So
I love it.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's All Gravy.
That.
Yeah, that's a great title.
Thanks.
That is fabulous. Oh, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your cookbook and your story, because I think your story is so inspiring.
Oh, well, thank you. It was really great to share it with you. Again, I'm really just about helping people. So hopefully something I say resonates for someone somewhere. And what I like to say too is that even if it doesn't, there's somebody out there, if you keep searching, who will say something that will get you to click on some level where it, you know, suddenly it does resonate, and suddenly that help and that hope is there for you. So if you're suffering or if you're having a hard time, please don't give up, because sooner or later that person will come into your life and you'll hear things in a different way that will suddenly make it seem like it's possible for you. It is. So please keep going.
Jody Lynn, I think she's the first one who actually gave me my segue for my thing that I always like to end the show with.
Yes. Perfect timing.
So Dannie, on behalf of all those people you've never met or you've never seen who have heard your message or read something or saw your book or heard you on a podcast and you touched their lives in a positive way, on their behalf, thank you very much for what you do.
Oh, well, thank you both. You do amazing things for the world, and I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Jody Lynn, I mean, what do you think?
Oh my goodness. That's such a good conversation, Danny. From the bottom of my heart, I see you, like your heart, and I'm so grateful that you're in this world and doing the work that you are. So thank you for being here today.
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you both.
Beautiful. Perfect summation, Jody Lynn, as usual. So thank you guys very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere, and we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.